Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Blood Pigment Podcast. My name's Garrett Swader, and I'm here with Joseph
Hello.
and Fernando.
Hello, everyone.
So, in this episode, we're going to go through some tips and tricks and I guess opinions maybe on some multiplayer rules and our experiences running multiplayer games, whether it be in a con setting or for your local game store. If you've got a large group, you might want to get everybody into a game together. So, first, we're going to kind of go through what everybody's been up to since we last recorded. It's been a while, and then we'll get into that. So, first, I'm going to throw it over to Fernando. What have you been up to?
Maybe we should give a report on Dan first.
Oh, yes. So, you might have noticed that I did not say Dan in the intro. Dan has apparently gotten sick from a bad hamburger, from what I understand. So he is not with us.
Too much of a Whataburger.
What a burger it was.
We don't even know how we're going to end this episode without him here, so we'll miss you, Dan.
We discussed this ahead of time. It's probably going to be a previous Dan outro. I've said before, he does that so spot on every time. You probably think we just have one recording of him doing it. We don't. He does it live each time. But this is going to be a recording. So
None of us want to do it.
well, none of us are pirates, so Dan's the only pirate certified here. So, Fernando, you got anything going on in your life besides work?
In my life, yeah, many thanks. But
Blood and Plunder related?
Blood and Plunder related. So I guess two things related to Blood and Plunder. The first is that I attended the Fall-In, which was last week.
Oh,
I
yeah.
I didn't play any game. I only had Friday to go look at games. But I know Tyler was there. He was all the convention with the Blood and Plunder Grade 1 fight and with Blood and Valor, and I think Blood and Valor received some prize. I saw that in the news. Well, in the
Oh, yeah.
convention news.
Yeah, I saw he won like 2 prizes, I think, for that.
Oh yeah, 2 prizes. Oh, that's interesting. And there was also a Port Royale game, which I didn't attend either, but I know it was there, so it was interesting.
Did you get to see it or just heard about it?
No, actually, I didn't get. I think it was on Saturday or something like that. So I did not get a chance to see it, but I know that it was there. So that was interesting. Besides that, well, I'm painting the Adepticon display forces. I think I haven't told you that I did receive the Dutch forces, and I am currently painting them.
Awesome.
Very nice.
So yeah, I have not played in a long time. Well, in a couple of weeks.
Thanks for working on that project. So that project, we're trying to do a little 12 by 12 inch display board at Adepticon, kind of featuring the different nationalities, armies, and Fernando's working on painting up some of those miniatures, hoping to do a little like 12 by 12 inch base with some sort of terrain on it to make it look cool and have a little label on it for what nation it is, so people walking by can kind of see the different ways you can play the game.
Yeah, so far the English are done, and I am with the Dutch.
Only 4 or 5 more to go.
Yeah.
Dan's been painting a ton of minis for Adepticon too. Really owe you guys both a lot. He's been painting tons of minis for the historical scenario games, which you're trying to provide all the forces for. So lots of busyness and work going on.
We're trying to be busy now, so we won't be as busy at the con.
Yeah, I won't be painting anything at the con.
I'm just saying for the historical scenarios.
Yeah, I'm optimistic about the way we have it set up this year. Hopefully it goes well.
I think it'll be a lot better. To clue in on what we're sort of talking about, the way we have been doing historical scenarios has been exhausting for everyone. So we've kind of tried to change that up this year to make it a lot more easygoing for us. So we're just going to have 2 historical scenarios. They're going to be run once a day.
Right.
And it's going to stay set up through the whole con. So one scenario will be run every day of the con, and the other one will be run every day of the con as well. Do you have anything to add to that, Joseph?
We're trying to get a table set up where 4 people can just bring their forces and then have a team game 2-on-2. So then you can just bring any army, sit down and do a multiplayer game, which is kind of fun. But historical scenarios, we're trying to fine tune the forces, have them all provided, have them set up so it's easy to jump in. No mucking around trying to match people up, get people loners, get people on the right side if we have too many pirates versus too many English, and trying to get 4 tables set up at once. That was a nightmare. So this should be better.
Yeah. Doing I can speak to experience. Doing all that is a nightmare.
And we're trying to paint all the demo forces too. Dan has like 200 miniatures. We're trying to get 8 armies painted up for demoing so they can be devoted sets. We don't have to mess up anything or pull out miniatures or lose track of stuff. So many minis.
Yeah, we're trying to make it to where you spend a lot of time setting everything up at the beginning of the con, and then at the end of the con, you pack everything up, and that's really all you do. I know that's not going to be what happens, but that's the goal.
Hopefully lose less minis.
Yeah.
Have everything where it needs to be packaged clearly.
Maybe lose less minis that you care about.
Yeah, too. What did you actually do at Fall In? What did you actually get? Did you get to play anything, or you just kind of check everything
No,
out?
I just went for the afternoon. Just it's
Okay.
like an hour and a half away from me, so
Yeah.
I wanted to see what was occurring. But yeah.
I heard they had a bummer. The Phalanx Consortium was supposed to be there and have some Firelock stuff on hand, but apparently they weren't able to make it last minute. So Tyler was working hard and demoing the game, and people were ready to buy it, but there was nobody to sell it there, which was disappointing. So
Yeah, there was no Blood and Plunder. There was no Firelock being sold at the convention.
Firelock Games just need to get 6 more employees and their own U-Haul van to be able to drive around the country full time so they can hit every con. Should be easy, right?
Yeah, I mean there are some stores that do that. I mean they are real like stores, but I mean not like game companies, but there are stores like that are at every convention.
Yeah, it's a big project to drive all the way from Florida up to Pennsylvania for a convention. I wish they could do it more. I know they do too, but maybe they'll be able to get something there next year. Or at Historicon. Historicon is even bigger. It'd be good.
Well, I remember last year some stores did carry Blood and Plunder, but not this time.
Is Fall In a little smaller than a Historicon, or about similar
Yeah,
size?
it's smaller. It's one day less, and yeah, less people, but still it's relatively large.
Is it the same venue or just the same city?
I was not in the last Historicon, but comparing this one with 2 years ago, or 1 year ago, it was different one. So
Okay.
Historicon is kind of in the middle of Lancaster. This one is in a hotel in the suburbs of Lancaster.
I wish I could go to them all, but
I mean, I could not say how large is this compared to the other regional conventions, though.
it's like it's pretty good size.
It's a decent size. It's nowhere near as big as Adepticon or Gen Con, though. Like,
Oh yeah.
those are massive.
I mean, Historicon do attract people from all around the world
Mm-hmm.
because I know that English people do come to Historicon.
You hear that, Liam? Here to come.
Okay. So, Joseph, what are you doing?
I've been working on a lot of stuff, but it doesn't seem like I've been getting very much stuff finished and out. I've been super busy with work the last like 3 weeks. I hardly got to do anything, which is annoying, but I drove a whole choir of 45 high schoolers up to Spokane, which is all the way across Washington State, for a choir festival just last week, and got home yesterday. So I had a big other deadline before that. So a lot of stuff distracted me. Real life. But I have been getting some stuff done. I got to sit down and paint. I was finished an Iberville commander model that I started in the painting contest in the spring. I finally got to finish him. Finished my Master Gunner model from the Summer of Plunder, and finished a prototype for a new freebooter model. They've been messing with some alternate scopes for both freebooters and filibusters, and I got a couple of those and painted up on. So some fun new miniatures. just got off my desk, and now I have some of the English kind of frontier militia on my desk, painting them now. Always fun to paint. Speaking of that Master Gunner, what miniatures do you guys hope to see in the organized play kit for 2025? We need to start thinking about that too. I want a standard bearer.
Yeah, that would be okay. The problem with standard bearers is you want it to look like the unit that you have it with.
Yeah.
So, like, if you have it with a soldier, you want it to look like a soldier. If you have it with, freebooter, you kind of want it to look like a freebooter. So, I wouldn't mind that, but it wouldn't. I don't think it would be like tops on my list.
What characters do you guys use that you don't have a miniature for?
Grizzled veteran.
Yeah, but that's similar to me. Yeah, it's even worse. It's even harder.
I agree, it's the same, but
we got our surgeon.
Mhm.
Musician is nice, but we have that drum that can fit on a soldier pretty good. But there's lots of different kinds of musicians they can do. They could do a trumpet or even a fiddle. Pirates had fiddles. You could do a drum.
So like a mounted priest in a donkey.
Oh, that would be kind of fun.
That would be awesome. I'm gonna throw it out there, the alternate cavalry sculpt that we're missing now.
The rearing, chopping guy.
The rearing, slashing cavalry sculpt would be great.
You could also have like Puritans, like non-Catholic priests.
Oh yeah, like an English. That'd be
A
good.
French and English version of the spiritual leader.
Not so overweight as what's his name?
Labat.
Labat, yeah. Anyway, I've been thinking about that and trying to start looking forward to the organized play kit. They said I could help out again, kind of plan that out. So
yeah, I definitely think it's going to be not as obvious this coming time as the Master Gunner was when we were thinking about it, because everybody just was like, "Oh yeah, Master Gunner, that's perfect."
Yeah. Anyway, but thinking about that, I've been working on the Adepticon scenarios right now. The plan is to do a Deerfield raid, which is early 1700s, and Queen Anne's War, big French and Indian raid on English. Can make it a 6-player game, I think. So it'll be a English town with a palisade wall and some. I'm really excited about this. Dexter agreed to make a garrison house for me. People have probably seen his pictures up on Facebook and stuff. So that'll be a centerpiece of that board, which I'm excited about.
Is Dexter coming this year? Next year to Adepticon?
I think he hopes to. I'm not sure if he's locked in or not.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
I enjoyed playing with him last time he was there.
I didn't get to play with him. Really disappointed. And then a local guy from my group, Riley, one of the English players, who's really active in Summer of Plunder, he's been working hard at painting up forces for that. So I'm really thankful for that. A lot of civilians and English militia and stuff. And now I'll be working on natives for it.
I had a question for you with that scenario. Do you have enough winter trees?
I could use some more. I do have some, and they're mostly just for looks. Because most of the game happens with the natives and French coming across the open place, trying to sneak in while the sentry is sleeping and get over the wall and then fighting in the town. But yes, we would like some trees.
Okay, so maybe not like a bunch of trees, but just a few.
Just something to get in the way of people and annoy and poke their tummies while they reach over the board to play.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, we could use some more.
I've got some stuff that I've not put foliage on yet that I did for a Halloween game, and I was going to put some snow on them if you needed them, or I was going to convert them into something a little more usable for me if not. But I may do half and half if that's the case.
Yeah, I have some, but not enough to make a whole board look good. But yeah.
Okay.
Then work on the Santiago de Cuba scenario, which is out of the upcoming expansion that is in development. Rise of the Buccaneers. I really should. Mike said he would come on the podcast and talk about or at least current plans for what's rolling out next. It keeps kind of changing, which is kind of the Firelock way. But we're going to do this scenario come hell or high water, even if we have to print the cards through something else. But should be Spanish English, which is kind of a classic matchup. Early
They fought each other a lot.
Yeah. Another Spanish town to raid. I've been working on those factions, trying to fine tune them and the scenario rules and stuff. So that's taken up. I got some good work on that last night. And then I've been working on development on that project with Mike, especially. He's freed himself up, got some people to do some of the other administrative, horrible, boring things. So he's doing some more of the creative work, which is awesome to see.
That's good.
Yeah. So I've been collaborating with him on that. So that expansion will be covering kind of the Western design, which you've been helping with that too, Garrett.
Yep. I feel like I've done very little, but hopefully what I have done has been helpful.
That whole Western design army is kind of a different flavor for Blood and Plunder, which is kind of exciting, but also kind of hard to hammer out. So it's been interesting. And then the Spanish Maroons on Jamaica are totally different too. So trying to wrap my mind around those and find a good way to represent them. They were Maroons. They were escaped Africans who were slaves of or servants or just living with freed Africans living in Jamaica, but they were like second, third generation. They'd been there 100 years already, so they weren't recently come from Africa, so they just behaved, they function very differently. So a little different than the Maroon faction from Raise the Black. So that's been kind of interesting to research, reading a lot of books. That book that you turned me on to, that Conquest of Jamaica, been great. Other thing I've been working on is we interviewed Benderson Little. It was really awesome, a book review of his book that so many people have read, and it's a great resource and influential in Blood and Plunder, the Sea Rover's Practice. We did an hour and a half great talk with him, and then at the end I realized my microphone was off the whole time, so I have to go back through and try to clean it up and put myself back in, which has just been an immense amount of work. But I'm too embarrassed to ask him to re-record it, so I'm stuck.
If you're listening to this, Benderson, just contact Joseph and re-record it.
Have mercy. No, I'll get it fixed. And then I've been behind on my battle report videos too. I was trying to go through Raise the Black and do battle report videos of each of the scenarios, but I've just been too busy with work and stuff to sit down and this Benderson Little interview. But I have a bunch of video and pictures from our Capture the Surgeon Amphibious scenario, which was pretty great. I need to patch together into a video. So that's kind of my current projects. How about you, Garrett? What are you working on?
So I'm continuing to work on my Galleon and my Maroons for my Escalation League for my group that I play with at the game store. Almost done with the Maroons. The Galleon has proved to be a project that I just kind of work on when I get bored with other things.
It's kind of a slow burn, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I got back on that recently, and I sat it down on my table and realized that it wasn't sitting flat. And so now I'm trying to workshop ideas on how to get it to sit flat, because that's going to bug the hell out of me. I ordered some more reenactment stuff, so that's cool. I've got a waistcoat coming, some Venetians pants, and a Just a Corpse big overcoat with the shorter sleeves, trying to make it as early in the period as possible, because the time period that I reenact is 1668, and as I understand in my research, the 1660s is the first time that garment started to get popular. It didn't get really popular until like 1680s.
I don't even know what exactly that looks like. I don't know that term.
It's the big long coat. It's got the upturned cuffs. If you look at your Spanish commanders or your English commanders, that they're wearing one.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very long. You'll if your breeches come up to or go down to your knees, you might not even see them wearing them.
Got it. Yeah.
It's the big long overcoat. But I got that in blue, and with the cuffs I got in a different color because usually the cuffs were a different color. That I got them as a sort of a wine colored red.
Nice. Sounds classic Spanish.
Yeah. Too bad that I'm probably only going to wear this as a freebooter.
Yeah.
But I do plan on doing both reenactments this coming year, so that'll be fun. I'll have to figure out what I'm going to do for 16th century stuff, but that'll be for the future.
That probably wasn't a small purchase. Those big historical garments can be.
They're pretty expensive, but my wife and I discussed it. She's been wanting to try her hand at making some stuff for me.
Oh, cool.
But when we were looking at that, I was like, this is going to be way too, and she agreed with me, like, this is going to be way too time consuming and advanced for somebody, starting out to do. So I'm just going to order it, and she's going to try to do some stockings for me, and maybe even some boot hose to wear.
Nice.
Those should be a little bit more beginner friendly.
Yeah, or a shirt or something that's just one layer and not multiple fabrics and stuff.
Exactly.
I've been down that road. It's dangerous. Dyeing your own material and everything.
Yeah. Which I'm sure some people do, but I'm in it for the history, not the clothes making. So
yeah.
Plus, I want to get this coming year after. I'll probably run Pike this coming year for both reenactments, but then after that, I might move on into a firearm of some sort.
Nice.
But enough about that. What do we want to get into for the multiplayer games? Do we want to go over sort of what the options are for multiplayer games coming straight out of the official books first?
Might be good to look at that. At least the No Peace Beyond the Line expansion has a chapter 13 on fighting large battles, army scale stuff. And that's the only official rules for playing multiplayer right now. Is that right? That's correct?
I believe so. That's the only book that I've seen multiplayer rules in.
And there's some great stuff in there. But there's several variations, in fact, which is kind of nice. I'll just run down the 3 different variations I see easy in here. One's armies and companies, where you have like 2, 3, 4 kind of normal standard Blood and Plunder forces with one person over a whole team. You can all just play at the same time, reveal all cards at the same time, and then just order up your card activation cards and activate that way. Or you can split up a large army, like a 500-point army with like 6 units to 2 units each, and have one player play the card, or just give each player 2 cards for the 2 units. That's one way to do it. Or you can have several companies, one person in charge of each company, and have one general, and that general can give each player a card and then they get to activate their whole company at the same time. It's kind of a faster way to play, sort of, because one person does a whole bunch of stuff all at once, but then you have a lot of waiting around and some balance issues. And then the final one, which they call the commandant variant for the large number of players. And this is, I think, closest to what most of us play, but I want to hear what you guys actually do, the details. And that's one player is the general, and then each player has their own force, and the general draws as many cards as the unit under them with the most units. Hopefully all start with 4 units or something, and then they play a card, and each player activates 1 unit in their force with that card. So you have each player doing 1 action, and then on the other side, back and forth. So it's kind of just multiplying how the activation system works. And 1v1. I think that's the way most of us play it. That's the way I've seen it and run it at conventions. So if you're looking at the rule book, No Peace Beyond the Line, good to read through it all. But that last portion of the chapter is what most people do, more or less. And feel free to modify it. But that last section on page 193 is my favorite.
I learned how to do multiplayer games basically by going to pigment events, so I run it the same way. So,
Yeah.
you know,
But there's lots of different variations and little details you have to kind of think of with fortune and your activation deck and your command points and your strike points and how you win or lose. So I thought we could talk about some of those and discuss what we found fun and helpful and what might be best for different situations. Do we just want to jump in with different games we've played and how they run, or just some details on those different elements, or what would you?
So I think I have the less experience compared to you playing multiplayer games. I don't think I have ever played a multiplayer C game, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So much, so I don't know how would that be affected. But in land games, I think the easiest way is what you do is basically you have one deck per side, and then you have one central commander that may have three or more. I mean, there's a lots of variations depending on the scenario, but you can have three or more fortune coins, fortune tokens per side. But yeah, I would say that the activation is one per side, and then you bid against the other team, and then all of your teammates activate at the same time. One one unit within each teammate.
Yeah, that seems to be the snappiest and lets most people play most of the time and least downtime. But you really have to crank on people. Everybody play at the same time. Don't watch the other person do their thing. You got to do your thing, so it keeps it moving. But yeah, I played this way at conventions and at a game store. If I do an event, all day event, we'll do some 1-on-1, maybe 2-on-2, and then one part of the day will be a big game for 6, 8, 10, or 12 players. Hopefully not that many. It can get a little unwieldy,
be a lot.
but it can be a great finale or a big group experience. A lot of people in my group really enjoy doing that big thing where we're all playing together. It's a different experience, and it's maybe not as precise, competitive, and balanced, but it's always a good time. It tells a good story, and everybody gets to have fun together and watch each other fail or win.
Yeah. I think most of the time when I do the games like this, I will have I like I said, I will play it exactly like we've done it at cons before. I think that's the most stable way of doing it. It's no game is going to really do multiplayer scenarios and games like this really well, but I think Plunder does it well enough that
Hmm.
you still get a good experience out of it. And C games, I do the same with C games, but the only thing that you might think about when you're doing a C game like that is I allow each force or each ship to do their movements independently of the overall team.
Yeah, it is something you have to decide.
Everybody has to move on the first activation, but you don't have to move on the same activation as everybody else in the middle.
Hmm.
I don't know if you
Right.
do it differently than that, but
Yeah, let's talk about all these different details you got to decide on, because that's an important one. I always just do it at the same time. It's easier, and people don't forget at that point. Is this a move
right,
turn?
yeah.
Yes, let's all move. Well, then we don't. Otherwise, like, did you move? I don't remember.
When I do these big multiplayer games, sometimes I find it better if I don't play and I just try to keep everybody on track and remembering things and, reminding people of things. It's sometimes good to have somebody just standing there and just making sure everybody's on the same page.
So that's what I was referring as a central commander, like a person that's basically in charge of the deck, in charge of basically making sure that everybody is in your team is playing, making sure that is maybe a stable strategy among all of the
Mhm.
people involved, things like that.
Yeah, and I'm just talking about like GMing the game, just keeping everybody together on what the objectives are and making sure nobody's cheating unintentionally, stuff like that.
Yeah, I guess we should have backed up and said first, know your audience. What is your purpose of your game? Is it a convention game with a bunch of new players who don't really know how to play, or is it a bunch of cutthroat players who want to play out a historical scenario at a competitive level? There's lots of different scenarios where it might change the way you do it. But often the biggest one is at conventions, at least that we've been kind of hosting. That's where we see it happen. These big games happen a lot. In that case, it is very prudent to have a game master who's watching over the whole thing, poking people to take their turns. English turn, go, 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 and pirates, time to go, and looking over, making sure people are getting the help they need. But then you have a game master, then you have a commander of both sides too, so you kind of have 3 people overwatching everything, but one kind of just trying to make the whole thing work. And Dan dropped some notes in here that are relevant here. Sometimes you have an odd number of players and you want to do a multiplayer scenario, and there's some ways to work with that, 2 versus 1, or even if you want to do a different kind of scenario, you can even do 3 versus 1 or 2 versus 3. Sometimes if we have an odd number, I'll just not play. If we have then we have even number, again, it simplifies. Or if we have odd number without me, I can just jump in and play if necessary.
Yeah.
So you can, as long as you aren't too tied to actually rolling the dice, you can modify it that way. But Dan's, kind of just look at Dan's notes here real quick. When he does 2 versus 1 or 3 versus 1, it says the opposing team plays as many cards as the other team. One player plays 2 or 3 cards. Okay, so they just play 2 cards out of the hand at once, so they get a bigger hand of cards, possibly. And the outnumbered player gets a free officer to match the command points that the other team has from their commanders. That's smart. So you can use a big commander. Maybe it's 600 versus 600, but it's 200, 200, 200. You can do 3 versus 1 or something like that.
Yeah.
But you need to balance it out with an officer to get some free command points in there. Yeah, I've seen he's sent some pictures and reports on some of the games he's done that way. They sound pretty fun.
Yeah.
And I've done something like that where it's like a galleon versus a bunch of little sloops. You can do 2 or 3 players on that galleon with the escort or something, and that's interesting. It's very asymmetrical. That would be a good chance to do something like that. But I got sidetracked. New players, they need a lot more help. So make sure you have a simple scenario, simple forces, where more veteran players, you can have everybody bring their own forces and do a lot more fancy stuff. But still that, and then with newer players, you might have that one devoted commander who's just giving out cards and not moving models. Or that's more like have you guys played Memoir 44? There's the Overlord expansion where it's very similar to this, in fact, where you give order cards to your different players, and you can't really tell them anything besides what's on the card, and you're just trying to coordinate all this. It's that D-Day kind of scenario, World War II.
How often do you play multiplayer games?
My group likes to do one every month. We meet every week, so maybe every 4th or 5th meetup, we'll try to do a bigger game of 6 to 8 players, and then at conventions.
I do them at conventions, and my group, I will usually I usually like to do between 4 and 6 during the year. I usually try to switch between smaller scale games where we're fighting each other 1v1 or larger multiplayer games where we can all get in together and play a game. Sometimes we break off into and do a little bit of both on game days, but yeah, we meet once per month. So sometimes we're playing large multiplayer games, sometimes we're playing smaller games.
I think it's a really good event to put out there to kind of attract some people that might not come if you're just going to be playing land raid at 100 points. But if you're like, all right, we're doing this big, give it a nice name event and put kind of the story or the pitch out there. And if they're being invited to something bigger than just a normal 2-player game, it kind of builds some interest and enthusiasm.
Another thing I want to say with the game master thing, I always like being the game master for these games as well, for if you have someone that has to leave early. You can kind of jump in and fill in for them to finish the game out.
I did that last time.
It might be if you are playing and you don't have anybody to fill in that spot when somebody needs to leave, you just have a unsatisfying ending to the game. Or you put way too much work on someone. It's like, okay, here, play my force for me and your force at the same time.
Mm-hmm. So how do you guys deal with fortune points in multiplayer games?
I typically give one side the standard 3
Yeah.
and then add 1 per player extra. So for like a team of 3, I would maybe give them 5 fortune coins.
And then does the commander, the commodore, or the commandant have them all and have to distribute them? Do the other sub-commanders have to petition for a fortune point?
That is usually how I do it. I say, you are in charge of these. You 3 as a team decide on how you're going to spend them, but ultimately it's this person's decision.
I like that. It's fun where you have to petition the guy to get a fortune point. Like, is it really worth it? Let's see. What do you roll? What are you hoping to do here? But sometimes I like, just everybody give your 3 fortunes, just play. It can be a little simpler and faster. But if you want more player interaction and some kind of fun, dramatic moments, when somebody has to ask the commander, it becomes kind of a public thing where everybody's looking at it and it's kind of fun. And then it's more embarrassing if they flub their second roll, or it can be awesome if they do well. But sometimes I just load up the 5 fortune for 3 players. Isn't very much. It makes it really valuable. So sometimes I'll do 2 per player beyond the 3, or even 3, and it's like 9 fortune for the whole game. But that's something you can kind of fine tune to give your game a little different flavor, more or less central or diverse or diversified.
Yeah, that's just how I've done it in the past, and that's sort of my rule of thumb. It's worked out pretty well so far. So,
and then how do you do commander command points? Part of the rules options in the book are there is one central commander for the whole force, a model, the commander of the central force can use his command points on other forces units, but it doesn't go the other way. The sub-commander's command model can't order anything that's not in their own company. Have you guys used that?
Yes, and because when I played like that, I have the sub-commander trait that allows me to actually activate other units. I don't remember the name of the trait.
Yeah. In No Peace Beyond the Line, there's a couple commanders that have that special ability that lets them command other units that aren't theirs, even if they aren't the commander.
So yeah, most of the time I play like that. Like there's a central commander that can activate other units, but not the sub-commanders.
Usually that central commander is a really big character. If you're doing a historical scenario, he's going to be the centerpiece guy that kind of led the whole thing. So he's probably going to be 20, 25, 30, 35 point commander. So he has a big command range, so that can work really well. Another thing I've done to make that work a little better is make that commander free, or just make that central force have some more points. Because if you have a 150 point force, 3 players, and then that player playing the general, his force is tiny because he spent 20% of his force on that one model, which makes the most important force the weakest in some ways. So give them 150 points plus the cost of their commander, as long as it's fairly equitable between the 2 sides. Kind of balances it out and makes the forces, especially if you're spending your command points on other companies, not your own, you kind of lose some of the value for your own force there if you're the general. So boosting up the point level or giving that commander for free might be another thing you can do to fine tune.
right. I've done it that way. We've also done it as a sort of like the Franco-Spanish alliance. If you have forces that are pretty different, you can just say, okay, you can give command points to other people's forces, but you got to pass a resolve test.
Language barrier.
If you really, really need it, you can try for it, but most of the time it's more efficient just to keep command points within your own force.
How about strike points? That's another big one that can be a can of worms. How do you guys use strike points, or just end of game? How do you determine winner, strike test, that kind of thing?
I think it's just a central pool of strike points rather than per side. That way you avoid the issue of having players that kind of leave early.
Yeah, I think avoiding player elimination is smart.
Yeah, you're saying have a team strike point instead of separate player strike points.
Yeah.
Yeah, the official rules, I don't really like them as far as this goes. It says if any company has 3 strike points, they have to take a strike test. So it's not reliant on how many strike points your opponent have because you have more than one opponent. So it's really muddy there to figure out how to compare. So if you have 3 strike points, you just take a strike test. And then that if they fail, their whole company retreats and is eliminated. So that's if you have 3 companies and then one of them just leaves the game, that's huge. And you can just lose your whole flank or center, which is disruptive and unpleasant for the guy who has to stop playing. And then if your force has at least one company retreated, then your commandant has to make a strike test for the whole army, and they could just fail. But I find these big games, you kind of plan a set time to do them. And even if one side is doing particularly well and knocks out one company, you don't really want to end the game until you see kind of the way that would play out more realistically, or you want to see what really happens, or you don't want to knock people out of the game. And if you do it that way, then it encourages all the players to beat up on one player on one side so they can just knock out that company, and then that gives them the chance to knock out the whole army. So I don't like that way. I like the just pool of strike points for the whole team. And you can do it a couple different ways. Sometimes I ignore casualty strike points altogether and just have, this is the goal of the scenario. If you do it, you win. Or at the end of our time or the end of these turns, whoever has accomplished this is the victor. Usually, sometimes winning isn't the main focus of a big, huge group game. Sometimes it's just being able to play all together. So even if you play 4 hours and you got through 4 or 5 turns and it's still fairly competitive, usually there's fun things have happened. And I've finished games out where, all right, count up all the strike points. We're still pretty even. I'm just going to roll a dice to see who wins. And that's entertaining in itself, but maybe not as satisfying as playing the game full out. But sometimes these big games, they take a while and you got to be realistic. I like a simple objective everybody can see. Whoever owns the majority of these 9 objectives is going to win the game. So then everybody can see it. You don't have to ask this commander, how many strike points you got from casualties? How many strike points do you have from casualties? And crunch the numbers every turn. It's just easy for everybody to see. Everybody can kind of participate in that push and pull for the win. Especially if with newer players, you don't want to have to explain all the strike point ways you can get strike points. Is your ship on fire, or do you have a critical damage? Sometimes it's just like whoever controls the most ships in the sea game at the end of the game, or whoever controls these objectives. I find those work really well for quick and big games that people might not be really read up on the strike point rules.
Right.
I monologued. Sorry.
So another thing that I want to bring up that sort of goes into a preparation for the game that you're running is, I think, really think about the scenario you want to run and think about this. This kind of goes into the know your audience thing, because I know some groups are really, really into the history, and then some groups are not. And so you want to really think about what scenario you want to run for your group. So if you've got a bunch of just plastic pirate fans, maybe just go with a generic kind of fantasy-esque pirate scenario that they're all going to enjoy. If you've got a lot of people that are like us here that are really into the history, I would be more drawn to enjoy a historical scenario versus that.
Let's do the Battle of Flint River. Get all the forces just right and the characters there and everything, right?
Exactly. I love that. But yeah, I wanted to just mention that. And also, if you're running these scenarios, really, really read them and get familiar with them before you show up.
If I'm going to do one at a convention, I'll try to play it with my local group at least once beforehand. So if I'm going to run it, I need to know it inside and out.
Yeah. And I want to make my mistakes on the smaller scale, then I won't make those mistakes later.
Yeah.
So really the way to play multiplayer games is to think in terms of narrative, in terms of really it's kind of an event that you will prepare for. It's not like a pickup game where you said, I will bring 150 points or 200 points. and let's just meet and play. It's no, it's like we should think in terms of what we are going to do and what's the goal and the rules beforehand, like before attending the game itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I've done this in the past, and it's really helped. Your players can sometimes, especially this has happened to me when I've ran something that Joseph has written. I'll print it out multiple times and hand it to people for them to read before we get started. I've read it, I think I know it, but then somebody reads something that I've not noticed before, and I'm like, oh, well, yeah, okay, yeah, I didn't actually notice that before. Thank you, but we'll keep that in mind. So that's a good idea too. Is just to have everybody the rules there so that they can read them as well before you get started.
If you're kind of running the whole game and providing all the forces, there's things you can do to make it run smoother. One of the big things is just make sure each force has the same number of units. And it's a fairly low number. Don't do some weird English militia force with 8 units of 4 models each, because then somebody just playing and playing and playing these little tiny units while everybody else is already done. So 3 or 4 units per company, then everybody gets to kind of play at the same time until units start to die. That's a good way to design those forces. And then the same on both sides too. Don't make one side have 6 units per force and one side had 4, unless you want some of that asymmetry that makes it feel different.
Yeah.
Another thing for picking factions, some faction rules are odd when you start mashing them together. Like all the Buccaneer factions, they let you do a mulligan of your hand at some point during the game. If you do 3 of those factions all together, do you get to do that 3 times or just once? Or if a commander has terror or a faction has terror, does that apply to everybody or just one? Some of these rules are designed for 1v1, and they start to break down or become more powerful or less powerful or just confusing when you expand the game. So be conscious of those rules that might come into play and think about them. It's fun to be able to apply your rules to the bigger group. So if I can, I'll try to let everybody, okay, I am the English militia, so I have this rule and I can use it. But one of my other companies is the English Buccaneer, so they have that ability to discard a hand, and I'm the only one that's a hand, so yes, we'll apply that to that. But you need to be clear about that up front, otherwise it can cause misunderstandings and odd things happen.
Yeah, or if it does come up, know what you're going to rule when it happens, so.
Yeah, but it's better to be up front with all the players if they know what they're doing. So if it's a brand new player, you don't really need to tell them all those things because they really don't
Right.
know what's going on anyway.
Only discuss it if it comes up.
Yeah.
Which you'll always have that one new player that really gets into the minutia of the rules way too early, and they'll ask you all these questions, and it's like, man, I don't want to. Yes, I don't want to get into it like that much right now.
Yeah.
You were doing a very good job of reading the rules. I will tell you that.
Well, I think we cover all the big things. Any other details we want to hit? Otherwise, maybe we could talk about different scenarios we have played and how they maybe some highlights or lowlights of them.
So yeah, maybe we can talk about one scenario that's really stuck out for us in the past that we've run or been a participant in. So I can start with you, Joseph.
Okay, I'll just talk about a fleet battle. So part of the Summer of Plunder scenario booklet for the organized play kit was just a very simple fleet battle. You line up across the 4x6 table. We didn't talk about table size, but in general, 4x6 is really good for 4 to 8 players. You can kind of tweak it from there, but 4x6 is kind of the biggest map. It's easy to get. Fleet battle. Line up, deploy your ship across the table, and fight it out. Whoever controls the most ships at the end wins. And it's really fun, free form. People can do their own thing. I find in a sea battle, deployment is really important. I've seen people deploy a little further away, and your ships don't move very fast in Blood and Plunder, especially in a slow-moving, maybe game you only get 4 turns in. Yeah, sometimes big games are shorter as far as turn count, just because it takes longer to get through. So if you're going to do a sea battle, they're really fun, but there are some pitfalls. One of those don't deploy too far away, so you're just moving. It's no fun to have other people boarding and shooting and cannons, and you move your ship 4 inches. I activate this unit, and they do nothing. So be careful to
I'm gonna get
deploy
there,
close
guys.
enough.
Hold on.
Yeah, just another
Save some
hour,
for
and I can
me.
roll some dice. And then another thing that breaks down a little bit in multiplayer sea games is boarding. If you have 2 or 3 players boarding one ship, and this happened, I'm going to sneak it in here, in the treasure ship scenario, you have a galleon versus several other smaller ships. If you have more than one person boarding the same ship, it can turn into this big mass of floating of ships all grappled together. Nobody's moving anymore. And then the other thing that can happen is a deck gets filled. It has your 2 enemies and your 2 friendly units, and you can't get any more guys in there, and you can't attack anybody else, and the way is blocked to the next thing. It can just get messy as far as boarding. So sometimes these ship games can also turn into kind of 1 versus 1, but a bunch of them in a row, and that's okay, I think. Don't try to beat up on one player and eliminate them. Try to make it fun for everybody, even if it means you aren't doing the most tactically brilliant thing. Don't shoot all your cannons at one guy and eliminate him, just to simplify the game. Those are some pitfalls I've seen in a fleet game. Don't overboard someone and try to put 3 ships attacking one ship. It gets messy and unpleasant. And deploy carefully. But a big fleet battle looks great, really good spectacle. People will notice if you have 8 ships out on a table fighting all at once. And very easy, don't need any terrain. Everybody brings their ship, plops it down. It's one of the easiest multiplayer games to set up.
That's true. Actually, I lied when I said that I have not played any C multiplayer game, but the issue is that I have not played in teams. I played the 1 versus 1. And the issue there is that at sea I played with my piraguas, and I was facing, I think it was a brigantine and a sloop. And I approached one, tried to board, and then the other one approached and hit me, and then I boarded the another one, but I ended up losing the first because I boarded each with one piragua. So yeah.
We didn't address that, but 3-player, every man for himself is generally a bad idea, in my opinion. The only exception I've seen to that is the treasure scramble, where you aren't really trying to kill each other, but to just grab the most loot. Every man for himself usually ends up being one person getting hammered.
Yeah, because you have you have incentive to eliminate one, right?
Last time I played that, I was English, and the other 2 guys were French, and at the end of the game, one of the guys said, "Oh yeah, we weren't on a team, were we? I thought we were just both French." So I got massacred.
In those games like that, it usually works out that somebody makes an alliance and somebody gets hammered.
Maybe by accident or default, but yeah, every man for himself is a recipe for disaster in my.
I'll say if you're going to do a free-for-all scenario like that, try to make it a 4-player scenario if possible, and also make it a very casual, fun, non-competitive thing.
Yep.
Like I ran the treasure hunt recently, and you're really battling against like the ghosts that start popping up. Like not very many players really attacked other people all that much unless they were unmolested by ghosts and also were trying to pick up the treasure. But even in that game, one player just got hammered because 2 guys kind of halfway made an alliance on one end of the board and nobody else did. So it turned into almost a 3-player game.
Yeah, it can be unintentional, but it can happen.
Yeah. But I don't think anybody cared all that much because it was just kind of a light, fun.
Yep. Heavy on the
game.
objective rather than confrontational.
Yeah, I personally some of the most fun I've had playing multiplayer games is the 3-player, but you're doing a 1v2 type thing where the forces are imbalanced. One player has the larger force and the other 2 players has the smaller forces trying to work together. I've done that before with ship games where one ship whether it be a galleon or sixth rate, is battling against two smaller ships. It's pretty fun. In a challenging way, if you're on the other side of that, to try to coordinate and take down this monster, and being the monster is always fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I've ever done the fleet battle scenario, but I really want to do that. It's on my short list of things. If I had my say on what we did at Gen Con next year, it might be a fleet battle instead of the treasure ship.
Mm-hmm.
I think the treasure ships, in my opinion, kind of played out. We've done it for 2 years in a row, and it's went very poorly for the players that have tried to take the treasure ship. So I don't want them to feel like a battered housewife here when they play games at Gen Con. So we might try to do something different next year. I don't know, but yeah, those are sometimes my favorites. The big ship battles as well are always fun.
Other ones I have played are Deerfield Raid. We've tested that one once. The Assault in Charlestown was kind of fun. That's the amphibious one. That's kind of harder to balance.
I think Charlestown was, in theory, a good one, but not when people would bring their own forces.
Too much chaos, for sure.
Yeah, if you curate the forces on that one, it's a good one. But if you're counting on people to bring their own forces, it kind of is chaos.
The Battle of Panama is a nice, simple one where it's just a fairly simple board and you're English trying to charge across. And the Great Swamp Fight been played quite a bit. Tyler did that a bunch at the Fallen event. Every time I played that, that's another thing we should bring up real quick, is just be careful with point levels when you have a clear attacker and a defender. It seems like the advantage for the defender is accentuated almost even more in a multiplayer game like this. So if you have 600 points sitting in a fixed position and the other 600 points charging at them, trying to take something like a raid or something, it's not going to work. You need to adjust those points up and down a little bit or put some units in reserve or something. Just be conscious of the objectives and don't be afraid to adjust some points so it's actually a competitive rather than just a shoot down. I've seen Great Swamp Fight just be a turkey shoot and all the English are dead before they get to the wall.
So I played that one by Taylor, not of Lean, but before that, and it was pretty. I mean, I don't know the exact list, so I don't know how he actually fixed that kind of thing. But from what I remember, he played 2 games. He had 2 games, and it was one for the British and one from the Indians, and it was pretty balanced.
Good. Yeah, sometimes if you're making the forces, you can make them kind of dumb for one side that has the advantage, like buy some stuff that you aren't getting full value out of. Like if you're Spanish defenders, give them some field guns to shoot. I have some points, but they aren't necessary. They're fun, but they balance it a little bit.
So I would say generally, I think the fourth is under costed in terms of points.
Fortifications.
Fortifications, yeah, generally, yeah.
Yeah, especially when you get up to the higher point level. If you have a 100-point list and you spend 20 points on your palisade, that's considerable. But if you have 300 points and you spend 20 points on your palisade and you stuff all the men as close as they can get in, that's it's a big advantage. So yeah, fortifications in general probably undercosted.
Yeah, well, I think the issue, as you said, is the point is that they don't scale.
Yeah.
In for larger games, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is hard.
But the way in which you play those is in large games, so it's kind of weird.
Yeah, so like I said, don't be afraid to tweak the point levels.
Okay. So do we want to move into announcements?
I think so.
So I've got one that I was just going to throw out there. It's not really Blood and Plunder related, but I was going to throw out there in case people wanted to come. Cyril's Raid in St. Augustine is going to be on March 1st in 2025. This event's free to attend, and the encampment that we do is also free, and it's being held at the Fountain of Youth Park there in St. Augustine. The kicker with that is you have to go into a different entrance if you only want to do the encampment and not the park. If you go to the park and pay for the ticket at the park, you can come into our encampment. But if you want to do just the free encampment, there's a separate entrance for that. So that was some of our duties last year, was to try to make sure nobody snuck in our entrance and got into the park for free. So
Guard duty.
yeah. And then we also have Adepticon, also in March 2025. That should be at the end of March sometime.
26th through 30th.
26th through the 30th in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. New location this year. Excited to see what all that's about. Never been to Milwaukee before.
Me neither. Are you coming to that, Fernando?
Yeah, I hope so. But the issues that I will be flying if I go, because I have some scheduling issues here.
Got to be able to get there quick and back quick.
Yeah.
Understandable. Do you guys have any events or anything you want to plug coming up?
I don't have any local events planned right now, but I need to put together a plan and rules for the painting contest starting up on January 1st. So be thinking about that.
Oh boy.
Winter painting.
Should be fun. I'm excited that I'm not going to be a commander next year in Summer of Plunder. that's gonna be nice.
Yeah, I've been focusing on Adepticon for a while, but we need to start laying groundwork for Summer of Plunder again.
Yep.
Keeps happening.
The world keeps turning.
I do have a events page on Blood and Pigment that kind of has some of more of the event details as they are right now for Adepticon, and has some other dates for some other conventions that might have Blood and Plunder stuff, or might be opportunities for you to coordinate and run an event at your local convention.
It'll be on into the summer. It's usually at the very end of Summer of Plunder, but Gen Con as well. I'm going to be there. We already have our hotel set up and everything, so I'm sure I'm going to run some kind of Blood and Plunder thing.
Good deal. I haven't been there since like 2018, I think.
This coming year, I think, will be Colleen and I's 4th time, and we have a really good time every time we go. So
That's awesome.
for more Blood and Plunder content, you can go to bloodandpigment.com and check out all the material we have there. We have articles on ships, nations, factions, terrain, painting guides, battle reports, rigging guides, anything you can think of, really. So go check that out.
Yeah, you didn't mention it, but you just put up a rigging guide for the Bermuda sloop. So
yep,
check that out if you haven't got your plastic ship rigged up. You can check out our slow-moving YouTube channel as well. I got those videos I was talking about earlier in the episode in the works, and should be up within the next couple weeks at least. And if you have more money than you know what to do with, you can check out our Patreon at patreon.com/bloodandpigment and help us out. It helps us host our website and use software and prizes for contests and shipping for prizes and things like that. And we appreciate anybody willing to help out support the community through what we're doing here.
And as always, keep a nice ready to win at your back, your heart.